Hey, what's up, everybody? Fred Minnick here. I'm about to taste the Old Fitzgerald Bottled and Bond. This is the Spring 2023 Decanter Series. It's 10 years old. I've typically been a fan of these. 10 years for a wheated bourbon is a particular sweet spot. It is that 8 to 12 mark is usually where a lot of brilliant flavors come about. But after I taste that, I'm going to compare it to a younger version of a wheated bourbon from Heaven Hill, which also makes Old Fitzgerald. And that's a product that I really, really like this year. And that's the Larceny Barrel Proof A123. As you may recall from a review about 3-4 months ago, I basically said this is a big old giant caramel bomb. So I'm excited to compare those two. Now, I always like to give history when it comes to tasting these heritage brands and tell you a little bit about why they are important for the overall bourbon scene. So if you want to just go ahead and skip that, I will have that information there. If you want to listen to this, stay here, but go ahead and skip if you just want to see my tasting notes. But I would also say, if you don't want to hear history or some backstories on brands, you probably shouldn't watch my channel, because that's what I'm all about. You don't write 7 books and start a YouTube channel because, you just want to give down and dirty reviews. Those work sometimes, but not for Old Fitzgerald. This brand is so interesting. It's so interesting. So this was Pappy Van Winkle's brand. After Prohibition, Pappy Van Winkle really made Old Fitzgerald famous. And it becomes an important brand from an advertising perspective, because he was doing these advertorials about Old Fitzgerald on the Princeton Journal, and he was such a good salesman. Pappy Van Winkle was not a distiller; he was an owner and a salesman. So I would akin him to Bill Samuels Jr. from Maker's Mark, very, very similar. And Pappy was just so important for the overall bourbon scene. But of course, their family sells a distillery in 1972, and Stitzel Weller was actually renamed by Norton Simon, which was the company that owned it at that time. It was renamed Old Fitzgerald. So if you look at old photos, it was called the Old Fitzgerald Distillery. It wasn't called Stitzel Weller. Now, people here locally would still call it Stitzel Weller, but for those who were working at the plant under Norton Simon, as well as United Distillers and later Diageo, they would call it the Old Fitzgerald Distillery. So it was, Old Fitzgerald was probably more, it was more a part of the vernacular than, say, Weller. Now, the brand was owned by United Distillers, and United Distillers was making a lot of wheated bourbon to focus on the Australia market with their product Rebel Yell. Rebel Yell was also their product, so they were making all of this wheated bourbon at the Bernheim distillery, not at the Old Fitzgerald plant, and they were making all of this bourbon for the Australian market and the Japanese market. But the market changes in Japan, they basically had a crash in the early to mid 90s, and Australia changed their tax structure. And United Distillers, which is really in its origins and its DNA, and still is today, which is now called Diageo, they were a Scotch company. And they were this American whiskey business, it's not for us. We'll keep some plants, we'll keep some brands, but let's shed off this dead weight. So they would sell Rebel Yell to Luxco, and they sold Weller to Sazerac, and they sold Old Fitzgerald to Heaven Hill. Heaven Hill would later also buy the Bernheim plant that they were making a lot of this whiskey at. They would later buy it after their fire in 1996. Now, the reason why this is important is Heaven Hill takes it on, and they don't really put any effort into it. They put no marketing money into it. They really don't. They're kind of giving it the Heaven Hill treatment. Great whiskey, great value. Go in and buy an Old Fitzgerald Prime for $9-12, and that was kind of their story. They did that with a lot of their brands: JTS Brown, JW Dant, Fighting Cock, and Old Fitzgerald was a part of that kind of like bottom tier, moneymaker shelf for them. They didn't put any marketing into it, but it didn't get like the kind of sales that Evan Williams would have gotten because they put marketing into it. And so when the bourbon boom, the bourbon boom really does begin around 2008. 2008 is when we start seeing like everyday products like Jim Beam and Maker's Mark and Wild Turkey and Evan Williams. We start seeing them have double-digit sales increases from the previous years. And so when you start seeing the regular everyday products get double-digit sales increases, you know you got something hot. And Heaven Hill was not seeing that kind of movement with Old Fitzgerald. And the story in American whiskey is if a brand isn't moving but the whiskey is great, repackage it, give it a kind of a new story, and you'll see you'll see sales go up. And so they did that. They took the regular Old Fitzgerald line off the shelves and created Larceny. And Larceny is this is the same whiskey that Old Fitzgerald is. It was the same whiskey that they had, but they changed it in this slicker bottle, used the same kind of backstory about the key, which also you'll see Blade and Bow use that same story. You can see that there on the back. I'm never really big into stories like that, but that key story has generated so much folklore and so many brands. So you have they repackaged it as Larceny, and I would say that was a very successful relaunch. But what Heaven Hill did, what I think was even smarter, was they brought Old Fitzgerald back in this decanter series. And you know what? It wasn't just like a 4 to 6 year old product or a 6 to 8 year old product. They started making it special. So they were getting like the 10, the 12, 13, 17 year old barrels and putting it in this really nice decanter. And now this beautiful decanter is probably, if not the best package in all of bourbon, it's top 5. I mean, put in the comment section what you think is the best package in bourbon, and I will tell you, I think this decanter is right up there with it. It happens to be one of those bottles that you try to chase, you try to get, and it's harder to come by, and it's consistently in my, one of the releases consistently in my top 25 every year. So their whiskey is typically rock solid in this decanter series. But I just want to give you a little bit of that backstory on that. I think it's important that you know a little bit of the heritage of these products. But of course, now I'm just going to jump into the tasting. And that's been, I wasted 8 minutes of your time. So now let's get into the tasting. Boy, that cork is in there good. Look at that thing. Woo! All right. That's a pretty heavy pour there, if I do say so myself. I have no issues with going heavy. Okay. Hello. It's like a brown sugar and butter in a frying pan. Kind of sizzling in there. I would even go as far as to say is like bacon, like brown sugared bacon, candied bacon. I was just at my buddy's Gary Penna's house, and we were doing this event at the Rocktown Distillery, and we did this candied bacon, and it's a smell that is really reflective in a lot of bourbons, and it's you don't usually hear bacon get brought up in tasting notes, but sit back and by a smoker and smell that bacon just kind of fuse with that brown sugar to be candied, and you'll know that smell. Okay, little hint of oak there. You know me, I get a little nervous when I smell oak. Now, I'm not talking about like if it's a hint of oak, I'm okay. but I don't like over oaked products, and this has a little bit of that astringency on the nose that it smells like it may not be balanced. So like after we have that kind of really nice brown sugar candied bacon smell, it wafts in with a really overpowering oak note. Not a fan of that. Not a fan of that at all. That oak note is definitely there. It's the first thing that I taste. It's feeling pretty hot on my palate. Now, I'll take another sip to make sure, it's just my palate getting acclimated. But, when you do this professionally, you should be able to just jump in and taste, and you really don't need to warm up. This is something that I do for a living. So I would say, when you taste 1,000 to 2,000 spirits a year, your palate, whiskeys, and I just right off the bat, like it's rubbing me the wrong way. It's coming in with like this oak note. It's coming in hot. So let me taste again. But not that a negative review from me on this would hurt its sales. If this bottle's out there, people are going to chase it. But I'm going to be honest anyway. Yeah. I find that it's pretty flat. There's this oak note, and then there's just kind of like this general, slight caramel. There's a little nutmeg, but it's got a flash of heat. I feel like this alcohol is coming in too strong, and that's saying something because it's only 100 proof, of course, bottled and bomb, and it is. It's not really resonating with me. It's not really hitting my palate in a way that these Old Fitzgerald lines often do. So yeah, I'm just gonna say like this is coming in flat, very short on the finish, very very short on the finish, and now I'm going to taste this up against the Larceny Barrel Proof A123. Now, if you recall, when I tasted this previously this year, I was like, woo, caramel bomb. So, let's see. Oh, yeah. That's more like it. No oak there. Just caramel city. Oh, my God. Again, I'm tasting the Larceny Barrel Proof A123. Oh my God, I'm buying this all day long over this. Yeah, the Larceny 123 is just walking circles around this, and I would even say that it does not feel hot on the tongue. This is 125 proof, 125.8 proof, and it feels less alcohol forward than the 100 proof Old Fitzgerald. And that's telling you something. The flavor of alcohol and alcohol being on the tongue is not an indication of proof. I've had 80 proof bourbons that tasted like all alcohol, so you cannot ever judge the proof for the flavor of alcohol. It's very, very different conversation. Now, the intensity of this Larceny, it's still on my palate. I'm going to go back to the Old Fitz just to confirm. Yeah, I stand by what I said. This Old Fitzgerald bottled and bond comes out very flat for me. I would be picking up the Larceny A123 every day of the week over Old Fitzgerald 10-year-old. That's going to do it for this tasting. Thank you for tuning in. If you're not already become a subscriber. It'd mean a lot to me if you did. And put in the comment section that you're new. Love to chat with you. Also, go check out my Club Marzipan, the whiskey community that I'm building over on Patreon. You'll find a link for that in the description. We have exclusive tastings. We do Zoom tastings together. And they're going to get to see my top 100 before anybody else. In addition, access to my barrel picks. That's going to do it here, folks. Be safe out there. And remember, vodka sucks unless it's being used to clean up a dead cat. Cheers.